Last week, I had one of the most amazing and surprising adventures in my art journaling life. I spent one night, roughly 3.5 hours, creating my first ever junk journal. A tiny, yet a very deep and meaningful one, as it turned out. It was sort of a personal revelation, dare I say, and I cannot help sharing it with you here. In today's video, I will give you a detailed flip through this tiny little junk journal, and in the second part of the video, I will share my insights, which will be artistic and psychological and also philosophical, and also I will tell you why and how I've become a junk journal admirer overnight, literally, and why I recommend it now to everyone. Hi, I'm Anna, and I've started this channel to share art journaling tips, inspirations, and challenges, and also how I build my personal art practice for self-exploration. Being a pretty seasoned collagist myself, I've never made a single junk journal in my life because I think I just didn't allow myself to explore something different outside the familiar. And if I'm completely honest, I used to look down on junk journaling because it seemed to me impossible to find some deeper meanings behind, I don't know, arranging different pieces of scrap. And by the way, that thought was such a silly one for me to have. My husband and I are moving countries next week, so we have to declutter and consolidate a lot. And while I was going through stuff, arranging things, and by the way, I still have a lot to do here, suddenly I thought, why not trying to junk journal to keep some memories that I want to keep and see what happens. I didn't have a plan, I didn't have a fully formed idea what a junk journal should look like. I haven't watched that many videos even here on YouTube about that. So I decided not to follow any rules and just see what I want to do at the moment and how things sit together. Do they sit well or they don't? The process wasn't linear. I was going back and forth between the pages. I didn't follow the order of the pages. And at first I wanted to make just a skeleton, just arrange the pages over like during one night, and then on the following nights to fill this little junk journal up. But then I got caught up in the meditative process and I've made everything in just one go, and that was an amazing feeling. What I used as junk for this journal: different types of scraps that were left from my previous art journaling sessions, from life here in Tbilisi, and different fragments from the books that I have for collaging here. There are a couple of Soviet encyclopedias and also this book that I bought here in the city, but I don't think I will be able to take it with me, unfortunately. I've read it before I decided to cut it and it was very interesting, but yeah, I just flipped through the book. I cut out the phrases that caught my eye and collected them in a separate pile, and then as I junk journaled, I just picked whatever felt right at the moment without giving it a second thought. I just followed the junk flow. And this unplanned, intuitive, and very spontaneous process did something quite interesting and insightful. I have sent a message to myself in this book. I had a conversation with my subconsciousness in a way, and that conversation, the message that I got was so clear, and I didn't expect that at all. But let me finally show you what I have in here. As it's a hand-sewn book, pages are always opening up, so I use an old scrunchie to keep everything in place. The cover is made of a paper-based tray for tomatoes that I bought in a supermarket. It was from a local organic farm and I just loved the texture. It has an embossed inscription here and it says Fruitful 18, whatever it might mean. I secured the cover with a white paper-based tape here and added a small piece of linen fabric with not perfect words. It's from a sustainable linen clothing brand that I collaborated with last year. They sent me a few garments for review and a set of fabric samples. I used a simple white glue to attach the fabric and it worked just amazing. The prologue of this little story starts with a star silhouette. I kept it from my 30-day collage challenge, and the word imaginations. Here I played with different synonyms of one and the same thing and arranged them as if they were a staircase, climbing up or down. This is a scrap from the collage challenge with an apartment building, and for the page I used watercolor paper sheet where I tested new paints, and I really like the torn edges. They create very lovely texture. I accidentally found two scraps with the sky from a vintage art book, and they were just a perfect fit for the cobalt blue watercolor background and the poetic framing of this phrase. I have included a postcard with my own photo that I've made when my husband and I visited the town of Signagi, here in the Republic of Georgia, last year. It has mountains, a rooftop, and a cat sitting here. Here it is. And it sort of continues the sky theme here. It was such a lovely memory, and although I have more cards left like this, including it here felt very special. Yet another expressive scrap I found, and I'm so glad that I'm not the person who constantly keeps their paper stash neat and tidy, and thus I could find such gems that before I was too lazy to throw away. This is another phrase that jumped in this book without my extra thought or control, and it contributed to the deep message that turned out I sent to myself. This is a very interesting insert page. I have a small notebook where I keep random plants that I pick on my walks sometimes, so I found this flower between the pages. Its petals are so thin that upon drying up they got stuck to the paper, so I decided to keep the flower there. I tore the page out of the notebook and it already had some watercolor doodle there, and then I coated everything with white glue. And thus I secured it in place. For a rhyming element, I've included another piece of linen fabric, again with the help of white glue, and the word that made an on-time perfect appearance, and it looks like a visual poem to me. This page is part of my very early drawing. I experimented with using coffee to tan the paper, so it's here and here. And some artwork that I photographed in a museum in Tbilisi and ended up not using them for the collage challenge. And this is a piece of wrapping paper that Brian and I used for wrapping gifts for each other on birthdays and Christmas. Yet another perfectly unexpected juxtaposition. This is made of scrap and an image from the book that I found accidentally. It wasn't planned, but they are mirroring each other and carry an insight about the movement of life. At least this is how it felt for me. This is the philosophical meaning that I saw in here. And also the clouds that are reflected in this little water situation here rhyme with these stains that also look like clouds. This is the magic of arranging junk paper together. I really like how the lined copybook page looks in the journal, and here I took up the bird theme, which sits well together with the earlier sky theme. I always keep eyes that I don't use in collages because they are a wonderful addition to almost any journal entry, just like circles are. And I think it's just one of my favorite pages in this journal for its simplicity and complexity at once. This was an experimental circle that I've made about a month ago, and it has made its way down here in this spread composition, where I see the metaphor of opposites that are one, or the whole and the part of it. The middle spread of the junk journal has to be special, at least this is how I felt, so I included a page from my beautiful Moomin calendar. I think it was the month of February. This quote makes me emotional in a good way. It says, "Don't worry, we shall have wonderful dreams, and when we wake up, it will be spring." Experimenting with scrap outlines and empty spaces was on a whole different level here for me. The combination of a calendar grid and the cutout figure is filled with meaning, again from my very personal perspective, and the words just continue pointing me in the right direction to see what has to be noticed. This is a little short of memory, a star cut from silly festive caps that Brian and I used for our tiny family celebrations. I already decluttered them, but this piece will stay here. It's a fragment of my drawing when I just started using watercolors and was amazed by them. I cannot keep all my past drawings, so at least I included some dear fragments here. Sometimes a piece of paper is just a piece of paper. I just liked the created pattern here and the color combo pink and purple. Here I glued a strip from the book with a meadow and then the message. Before I didn't even know about the existence of such a word as peopling, and some pages in this tiny book are quite minimalistic, and I like it this way, to create more air for thought, maybe not for thought, but rather for feeling, and this whimsical random shape helps the feeling to move, to flow in a way. In my first video on this channel, I shared a 30-day challenge of sketching from life, and this scrap is from there. I cut my own silhouette to use as a collage element, and I used the shape, the form, but the emptiness remained, and I decided to use it. The coffee-colored circle felt right to be included here as well, and all these creates a narrative that I find very personal, yet hard to put into words. It's like I'm discovering my own symbols and metaphors, but more about this in my insights that I will share a bit later in this video. This spread turned out to be about the current process of me reconsidering what I own, how I own, and why I own. Here is another piece of glued fabric. I just love the texture and the look that it creates. The second part of the Signagi postcard, and next to the final message that continues the previous page. The recognized word, which is used here and also here, it's a mere coincidence. It wasn't planned, it just happened, and only during the final flip through, when I finished the book and left that meditative mood condition where I was while creating it, I noticed this coincidence. And the last spread is also with a personal metaphor. A circle that for me is the world and the wholeness, and the scrap in the form of a pit or a hole with a particle on its bottom. Together with this made-up phrase, it promises good outcome and hope overall. And the epilogue of this journal is a fragment of my meditative watercolor exercise, which here, I think, symbolizes interconnection of everything. At least this is how I want to think about it. So here are my top insights that I've had after I finished this very first junk journal in my life. I loved the wild and uncontrolled nature of this process. Dealing with junk and scraps removes the love of perfection and seriousness. Many people fall into the trap of perfection in their personal art practice, and I'm also guilty of that. I used to be so obsessed about neat details, but now I'm curing it with this. And I do believe that the spontaneity and intuition, especially in art, can bring up so many untamed things in you, can set you free, can feel liberating. And this freedom can spread into other spheres of your life. And it's a really beautiful feeling. The second insight is that a junk journal is a portal to synchronicity. Synchronicity doesn't have to do anything to do with esoterics or magical thinking. No, it's deep Jungian psychology when you have an insightful conversation with your subconsciousness. The concept of synchronicity was introduced by Carl Gustav Jung and describes how seemingly unrelated occurrences can feel intertwined and significant, often leading to a sense of wonder, guidance, or profound insight. Scraps and words from different experiences or pieces of art that were created at different times somehow met in this journal to shape a message that I really deeply needed to see at that very exact moment of my life, at this moment. Insight number 3. It's a wonderful, meditative, and low-effort practice for fine-tuning with yourself. You don't need a sketchbook. You don't need any fancy tools. You can create with whatever you have to still get some meaning, the meaning that is in tune with yourself at this very moment. And it doesn't have to be beautiful, it doesn't have to be anything but a raw piece of yourself. Everyday life with its mess and chores and anxiety, everything can leave us numb at the end of the day, and junk journal is such an awesome tool for bringing some memories and important thoughts and feelings back to you. And insight number 4, apart from psychological and therapeutical value, junk journal is a great playground for experimenting with colors, shapes, and composition. Its small format, especially if it's a tiny junk journal, is very satisfying and gratifying. And it's not instant cheap gratification type of thing, but I'd rather say that it's an accessible gratification experience. I have made this junk journal in just 3.5 hours, and here is the message that I've sent to myself. Be sure and don't doubt your choices. You will notice the patterns as the story unfolds. Have a trust in cycles of life. Don't forget who you are and recognize who you are not. This message that I sent to myself in the junk journal book can sound very generic and cheesy, I realize that, but at the same time, in this book, I have found some hints, very important ones that are just hard to put into words. They are more like on a mental, emotional layer of perception. And as I've already said, I've spotted some personal, very deep metaphors and symbols in here that make so much sense to me. So I will definitely continue making junk journals. I think I like the tiny format now the most, but of course I will maybe try to experiment with other forms. And I have already started collecting different pieces of scrap paper, of something that I thought maybe can be of use in the future. I'm using these tins for collecting, so it's pretty compact, it doesn't take much space, and they're quite light. Please let me know in the comments if you feel inspired to try this type of self-explorational junk journaling and what you think about it. Maybe you have already tried it, maybe it's part of your artistic routine, or maybe you think that finding deeper meanings behind art practice is silly. Although I think if you have watched the video until this very moment, you have a similar mindset with me and we are on the same page, and it warms my heart so much. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing if you haven't already, and maybe turning on the notifications. At the moment, I'm on my new 30-day art journaling challenge. That is super exciting, and I cannot wait to share it with you here. It will be on the channel quite soon, maybe in a week or so, hopefully. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, dear fellow creatives. I'm wishing you a good day, a great day, filled with inspirations, and I will see you soon. Пока-пока.